Welcome, everyone, once again to another episode of the InitiativeOne podcast. We have a lot of really incredible guests that appear on this show. But I've got to tell you, today is extra special for me. I get to introduce to you a brother, a friend, a soulmate, a colleague, who has been so dear to me and has been as much as I have mentored him, he has mentored me. And I want to introduce to you Dr. Michael Gordon to our show today. Michael is the Chief Medical Officer of the Honor Health Research Institute based in Scottsdale, Arizona. He is a practicing oncologist. He will be very modest, but he is one of the world's leading experts in cancer research, in developing clinical trials. He leads an entire institute of world-class cancer researchers, and those folks who truly are doing the important work of curing cancer throughout the globe. We've been working with Michael over 10 years. Honor Health Research Institute is one, even though we've worked with over 600 organizations, Honor Health is one of those top 5 for us that it just is, it's worth everything that we go through to serve people. Michael, we welcome you. It is so good to have you on this podcast today.
Well, Fred, thanks so much. And I truly appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to join you for the podcast.
So, Michael, let's just jump right into it. Share with the audience about the amazing work that you are leading as the Chief Medical Officer of one of the foremost. You guys are into genetic medicine. I mean, there's so many things that you guys are doing that are cutting edge. Talk to us a little bit about the amazing work that you all are doing.
Yeah, so thanks so much. The Honor Health Research Institute is a multi-targeted enterprise. Aside from cancer, we have tremendous strengths in the neurosciences, cardiovascular, GI bariatrics, rheumatology, pulmonology, but cancer, as you're noting, is the core element of our research program. And it is what I call the tip of the spear for the Honor Health Cancer Enterprise. Our Honor Health Cancer Care Network, a community-based network of practitioners, sees about 1/3 of all new cancer patients in Maricopa County. And our focus at the Research Institute is to sharpen and hone that spear so that we can deliver the best quality care to every patient that we touch. At HRI, we do that through clinical trials predominantly. We do it through our early detection program, focusing on trying to prevent patients from needing to go through more extensive cancer treatment if we can find their cancer earlier. And our program is divided into 3 core elements. Our pancreatic cancer program, our program in skin cancers and melanoma, and then we have a very large bundled program focusing on new drug trials that runs about 50 clinical trials at any given time, focusing on providing hope for patients with relapsed and refractory disease who have been told by their physicians, I don't have anything more to offer you. And we see those patients with the option of trying to enroll them on a clinical trial.
So you really are hope givers. The stories that you have shared with me and that we have seen personally over the years are just indescribable in terms of the things that you all are doing. And I want to take a little bit of a different angle. We could spend this entire time talking about the actual fantastic work and the mission and the purpose of Honor Health Research Institute. But I want to take a more personal approach because of our relationship and our friendship. You are so renowned in your medical circles that when your name is mentioned, everyone knows you, and you're seen as a giant in the industry, in the field, the professional field. And yet you have gone through your own trials with cancer in the last 2 years. Would you, and we talked about, I wanted to make sure that you were comfortable in sharing this story because you haven't always been comfortable in sharing this story. Walk through with us the personal trials of a cancer research doctor who faces a really scary episode of having cancer himself.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. You're absolutely right, and I have to give credit where credit is due. Your work with me, InitiativeOne's work over the last 10 years, in many ways transformed the type of person I am. It enabled me to move from being taken out the garbage guy, where I felt I had to be able to do everything that needed to be done, to being somebody who could be a more trusting leader and could delegate responsibilities. And everything that I learned from my experiences with you and with InitiativeOne really, I think, gets tremendous credit for the successful navigation through my personal cancer experience. So, you're absolutely correct. About 2.5 years ago, actually almost 3 years ago, I noted some very subtle symptoms. They aren't the kinds of things that an average person would have paid attention to, but as an oncologist, I was concerned about them. And I raised them to the attention of my primary care physician as opposed to ignore them. And that launched a week-long episode where I went from being an otherwise very healthy individual to having laboratory abnormalities requiring some interventional treatments, to being diagnosed with what turned out to be an early stage pancreatic cancer. And that was probably the furthest thing from my mind relative to the type of illness I might face in my career. As an oncologist, I thought about lots of other things that might challenge me health-wise, but I never truly anticipated or thought about cancer. And so, we went through a very rapid evolution, which culminated in my sitting in the living room of my partner, friend, and colleague, Dr. Daniel von Hoff, who is one of the most respected individuals in oncology and in particular in pancreatic cancer.
He is another giant in the field like yourself.
Yeah. And I was truly blessed because, I had people around me whose expertise was dedicated uniquely to the disease that I was battling. So whereas colleagues and friends said to me, "Oh, are you going to go to Texas, New York, Chicago, California?" I said, "No, I'm right where I need to be. I am in the place where I have the best options available to me." And, on a Saturday evening with the sun setting over the mountains, Dr. von Hoff pulled out a piece of an index card, and said to me, "This is Mission Michael." And I looked at him and I said, "You tell me to jump and I will say how high. What do you want me to do?" And he he ran down his list, and some of it was intriguing to me. It was treatments that he was recommending, approaches to care he was recommending based on, I call it the kitchen sink approach. Everything was based on science. But I was actually a little bit surprised given the strength of our program when he said to me, and I want you to go and see a surgeon in Milwaukee for your surgery. And I said, well, Dan, we have great surgeons here at Honor Health. And he said, yes, but Michael, you are so well known at Honor Health that I want you to go someplace where you are just another name and another Joe. I want you to get taken care of like everybody else. He said, sometimes celebrities run the risk of people wanting to tiptoe around things. And while I didn't have any reason to believe that would be the case, I trusted Dan in that regard. And it was a challenge. It was Memorial Day weekend, and I called my partner, Dr. Erkat Borazansi, who heads our pancreas program, and broke the news to him. And then I called a meeting of all of my faculty and broke the news to them. And everybody was concerned. Everybody had apprehension. Everybody worried about how I was going to do. They weren't worried about themselves. They were worried about Michael, which was wonderful. And, I went through a bit of a Kubler-esque type of concept. I asked the question, why me? Why would I be diagnosed with this type of cancer? What have I done to deserve this? And then we embarked on treatment. And, I was blessed by having, my wife, Sandy, my children, my son, Josh, and my daughter, Melissa, and their significant others. Now my daughter-in-law, Rachel, and my soon-to-be son-in-law, Nevin, who were there every time I turned around. That kind of support was just amazing. But, as I started my treatment and began getting therapy, I didn't get sick. I didn't miss a day of work. I continued seeing my patients, which brought up the next major dilemma, which was, from my chemotherapy, I lost my hair. The benefit of which was my wife feels I look 10 years younger, so she won't let me grow it back then. But I was on a specialized diet and I lost 30 pounds because I had really gotten overweight. So my patients saw me going bald, losing weight, and they intrinsically asked me questions like, are you okay? And I said, I got fat and sassy and I went on a diet and I'm losing weight and getting healthier. And my hair was getting grayer and I was getting more depressed about it. So I just shaved it off. And I think the patients accepted it because it's what they wanted to hear.
So I remember when you were going through that, you called me.
Yeah.
And you said, Fred, I'm struggling because I've always been given this perception that as the leader, the expert, you have to have everything together. And you have to be on top of everything. And what will my patients become scared that their doctor that they have entrusted their lives in such a vulnerable place in their lives that he's going through the same thing, and will they think less of me? You remember those conversations?
Oh yeah, they were huge for me. They were huge.
And I remember you gave me this script about what you were going to say, and it was professional. Everything was honest, but it was sterile. Yeah. And I'll never forget. I handed it back to you, and I said, Michael, just tell them the truth and trust that you have built so much trust with people. And I said, I'll never forget, Michael, a leader of greatness who is willing to be vulnerable only becomes greater in the eyes of his or her constituents. What happened from that moment on?
Yeah, it was so, as I went through my treatment, I had my second Kubler-esque moment of why am I doing so well? And asked the question, what have I done to be so deserving of this benefit? But you're absolutely correct. I hit a brick wall when I finished my chemotherapy and then my chemotherapy and radiation and was preparing to go out for surgery, where I knew I would be out for 2 to 3 months. And, it was your input and the input of my medical assistant, because that first letter that we were going to send out to my patients said, I'm going to be taking a leave of absence. I will be out about 3 months. Here's the plans for coverage while I'm gone. And you shared your insight, and my medical assistant, Claudia, I gave it to her to read, and she pulled me into an exam room, crumbled up the letter, pushed it in my chest, and said, "You are better than this." And with the two of you in my ears, I sat back down and I wrote a heartfelt letter that just said to my patients, in May of this year, I joined your ranks as a cancer patient, receiving chemotherapy and now chemotherapy and radiation. I've done exceptionally well, and I'm preparing to have surgery, which I hope will eliminate this cancer from my system and allow me to return to take care of you. But it will require me to be out for 2 to 3 months. And here's the plans for coverage. And I gave that back to Claudia to look at, and she just smiled, and that's the letter that went out. And the floodgates opened. Patients coming in with gifts, patients sharing with me that they had started prayer groups for me, all denominations. My patients who were of the Christian faith, of the Jewish faith, of the Muslim faith, everybody found a way to include me in their prayers for health and wellness. My staff, as I was leaving, handed me a box, and the box was tied with a ribbon, and inside of it were strips of paper where individual members of our team had written personal messages. And I was told to take 2 or 3 messages out a day and read them and appreciate that these were coming from people who believed in me. But it powered myself and my family through that 3 months, through my recovery, tragically through the loss of my mother-in-law, who got sick while I was on the tail end of my journey of treatment and passed away. And when I returned, every one of my patients was so welcoming, so thankful to have me back. And again, shared with me that personalized experience of, I just want you to know that I pray for you. And I tell everybody the same thing. I feel and I know those prayers.
Michael, here's the irony. You were so afraid that when they found out the truth, they wouldn't trust you.
Yeah.
And we found it was actually the opposite. They trusted you more. Why?
I think it was the experience of a shared journey. I had a different perspective. Some of my patients have even said to me, has it changed you as a doctor? And you know me, Fred, I'm a very empathic and empathetic individual. I am very caring for my patients and for my staff. But what I tell them always is it has produced a greater sense of urgency. a greater sense of urgency to make a difference in the lives of my patients, a greater sense of urgency to pick up the phone and communicate with people when alternative methods, waiting for an appointment in a week, might have been adequate. Now I understand what it's like to be on the patient side of the table and to need to get information. Medicine has become so fraught with technology that patients get information on their cell phones, in real time. And if I see something that not is concerning, but I know will be concerning to a patient because of the way it's written or how it could be interpreted, I feel the need to have to reach out best of my ability. And I think that, that has created a new initiative, if you will, within the program, because the staff sees that. And I have my experience. This is a word that I don't think is the perfect word, but I think my experience has become iconic in a way that everybody that we work with who had been here during that time and watched the journey joined me on that journey and came through it with a different set of expectations and a personal feeling for that experience. And that has, in some ways, transformed individuals and therefore transformed much of the program.
Michael, we've all been taught this myth that if you're a leader, you can't show, quote, weakness. You can't show that there are things behind the cloak that are full of uncertainty. And I shared with you prior to our coming on the air that I've known you as a friend, a leader, a colleague for over 10 years, and you've always been an excellent leader. You've always been known for your humility. You've never seen yourself somehow as better than someone else. I mean, your empathy is off the charts. But I said to you, I think that the last 2.5 years, I've seen the best leadership in Michael that I've ever seen. And it goes against the grain of what we've been taught. What would you say to the leader that's out there who's going through a season of difficulty, and they're afraid to be real? They're afraid to let people know what's going on, and they miss so much. What would you say to that leader about what you've learned and what you would convey to them?
Yeah, thank you. I think that leadership needs to appreciate that there is a difference between showing weakness and displaying vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
We are all vulnerable to elements, to health issues, to financial issues. But I believe that displaying your vulnerability allows you to demonstrate not your weakness, but your strength.
Yes.
And overcoming those challenges or meeting that vulnerability with that strength is ultimately what helps the people who follow you create in their own mind a tactic for emulating that process, solving those problems. When we first met, I remember sitting down with you, and you had interviewed all of my staff members back when we were in our private practice. And you said to me, "Do you want to know what everybody thinks of you?" And I'm like, "Okay." And you said, they love you. They think that you're a great doctor. They think you're a wonderful leader. and you can't make a decision to save your life.
I
And
remember that.
and I struggled with that because I was focused on wanting to be perfect. And through our interactions, I learned that perfection was not something that one could reach or easily reach or should reach. And that I needed to be decisive. I needed to make decisions. And I don't know if you remember, but you and I were meeting when we were doing our strategic planning. And as you know, I enjoy a hobby of playing
Oh,
poker.
I remember this.
And we went up to the poker room and we were walking around and I was explaining to you some of the decision making and betting strategies and how you decide whether to call or raise. And you looked at me and you said, "You do that for every hand?" And I said, "Fred, we do it for every card." And you looked at me and you said, "Then play poker at work. Trust your judgment, trust your insights, and trust your decision making. And you will be able to modify things on the next card. Your patients will trust you because you are making decisive decisions." And while I wouldn't equate oncology care with playing poker, I think that the strategy of trusting myself to make right decisions was probably the most significant impactor, and the impact on my staff, because I was now decisive about things, was tremendously positive.
I'll never forget the second round a few years later, as the institution evolved to a different place. I started working with you all again, and I did another round of interviews. And the irony is, not one person ever said that you were indecisive. The transformation was just phenomenal. In the last couple of minutes, Michael, you have this, you have something on your wall that is very, very special. And as you shared it with me, would you share that with our audience?
Absolutely. So the storyline behind this is, when I hit what we call my 2-year paniversary, my wife, who is exceedingly wonderful and is exceedingly skilled at making surprise parties and has made me 4, tells you how gullible I am, made me a surprise party. And my children bought me as a gift a brass bell to ring and to kind of just represent crossing that 2-year mark. And inscribed on the bell, I'm going to turn to face it, is a statement, a saying that says, "You never know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have."
Mm,
I read that and just basically burst out in tears, and it
mm,
still leads me into an emotional state, because they understood that what I needed to do was to be strong through the course of my illness, be strong for them, be strong for my staff, be strong for my patients, my extended family, and then lead to a point where, as I've come through this and I've asked myself, why me? Why have I had this course? But I've adjusted now my perspective and said, what do I need to do to make myself worthy of this blessing?
mm.
And I believe being strong, um, demonstrating that strength to people, sharing my experience, which I openly do with my patients. I have patients coming back who see me without hair and figure something must be wrong if he's still bald. And I explain to them why I still shave my head. But I am very open about my personal experience because it creates in many ways a level playing field. It allows patients to ask me questions, and it allows me to conduct that strength. Fred, before I was diagnosed, before we ventured on this, when we were doing our second journey with InitiativeOne, you asked us to create a personal statement, right? And my personal statement was, I exist to assist others in conquering chaos. And I worded down to the chaos because I looked at what I do, and I looked at what happens to people when they are beset by disease and the impact that it has on their lives. And perhaps God looked down on me and said, that's great, but let's challenge you to really understand what that means. And, with your help, with the help of my wonderful staff, my incredible family and friends, I've been able to meet that challenge, and hopefully we'll be able to serve as a beacon of hope for patients who are challenged in similar ways.
Michael, one of the reasons I love you so much is you're such a model of humility, of humanity, of compassion, and that somehow with the brilliant cognitive gifts that God gave you, I think your greatest gifts are the gifts of loving people, of empathy, of putting yourself in their shoes, so to speak. And you are a living giant of leadership for me. And I just want you to know you are a hope giver, and you're touching the lives both directly and indirectly of thousands of people. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and your personal story with us today. It's just, yet I didn't expect anything less from you. And I just want to say thank you for being with me today and reconnecting those special moments that you and I have had together over the years.
Yeah, it's been a huge part of the journey. And I thank you, and I'm thankful for you and Tracy and InitiativeOne for having come into our lives as an organization and my life as an individual, because there is the kinds of things that I've learned, the need to be transparent, the need to bring things onto the table and say what I mean, has been incredibly valuable as I've traveled this pathway. So
thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Fred.
To our audience, I hope that you can appreciate what a special opportunity that we've had together to spend time with Michael today. I hope that you will continue to follow our work. I hope that you'll continue to check us out on the think tanks that we do once a month. We have over 1,000 people a month that are attending those as our complimentary gift to our leadership community. We'd love to be able to do the kind of deep work that we've been privileged to do at Honor Health Research Institute. If we can help them, I'm certain that we can help you. Michael, I want to say once again, thank you, my brother, for being with us. I appreciate you and love you beyond words, my friend.
Same here, Fred. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care, you all, and have a great day.